back in the 90s, back in the 80s, it was easier because there weren't so many gadgets around. There was no YouTube, there was no Instagram, there was no instant gratification around. It was just TV, movies, and that's it. Now you have video games, now you have social media, you have all sorts of things where it's gimme, 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 now. So I always tell writers, always capture them in the first 5 pages. Always do it. Whether be it a drama, a comedy, an action piece, whatever, you gotta hook them in the first 5 pages to get them vested in your story. That's pretty much what Vigilant Fury is. That's how I wrote Vigilant Fury. It's once the action starts, it doesn't stop. It goes until the end.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Comics Grind. I am one of your hosts, Nico Rodriguez.
And I'm Ken, aka Comic Ken on YouTube.
And thank you so much for joining us for another weekly comics discussion. Today we have another very special guest in the house. His name is Julius Freeman, writer, awesome comic creator. He is in the house. Julius, how's it going, man?
Hello. Good, man. Good. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're kind of talking a little bit before we hit the record button on here, but we're talking about that. So you're from Southern California, that's right?
Southern California, yep. Orange County.
So my first question is, but before we pop into the weekly grind segment, what's the comic scene like that, man, over there? How is it? Is it indie centered? You guys like into capes and all that kind of stuff, or what are you into over there?
It's mainly mainstream. It's mainly superhero comics, Marvel, DC. It's rare to have most of the shops that I go to around Orange County are superhero centric, specifically Marvel and DC. There's probably maybe 1 or 2 stores that are friendly towards indie, and that's because the owners of those 2 stores are, like us, comic book fans. They love comics, not just superhero comics, but just the actual art form itself. And so they're a bit more open to buying a book from a local indie bookmaker, a producer, be it an artist or a writer. And but for the most part, it's superhero centered. Like I go to the shops and everyone's, on Wednesdays when I go in, everyone's picking up a Marvel or DC book, off the shelf.
Yeah.
So it's
for sure. How is there kind of a network of creators that you kind of hang out with, or you kind of ride?
Oh no. I will. I'm a introvert. So whenever I do see a creator, I kind of like, oh no, I don't want to bother them. I'll just leave them alone. That kind of deal. And then everyone else is like talking with them, and I'm just like, no, I'll just get my books and go. That kind of deal. I regret it. I regret doing that. It took me a while to get out of my shell, but I still find myself doing that. Like for instance, I hung out with an old friend of mine for dinner, and I sat at the table at the restaurant we went to, and sitting right in front of me is Rob Liefeld, like literally sitting in front of me, and I was like, and I was like, should I go over there and like talk to him? But he was with his wife, so I was like, oh no, again, the introvert in me was like, oh no, I don't want to bother him. He's with his wife,
Yeah,
but I should have just gone up to him and say, hey, I just want to say I'm a fan. Thank you for everything you've done. Appreciate it. And I could have just let them alone, but oh well.
Yeah, I don't know. Rob Liefeld seems like he could, be ecstatic about that, or be like, get the hell out of my face.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a two-sided coin in that regard. So I wouldn't know what to do in your situation either.
Yeah, and he seemed like, he was having a good time with his wife. So I was like, oh well, I don't want to be that guy, who comes, hey Rob, hey buddy, like that kind of dude. So
yeah, for sure. No, that's cool, man. Yeah, we'll get more into kind of your upbringings and all that kind of stuff here in a little bit. But let's go ahead and kick off with the weekly grind, guys. Ken, man, what you been up to this week in comics?
I'm never up to anything, man.
Oh, come on, dude.
Oh, come on, Ken.
It's called the comics grind. You need to be throwing down some.
I just watched videos about marketing, and I don't draw any pictures or anything. So
come on now.
Can we just skip my turn, please?
Can't just admit that you just watched the Last Airbender trailer over and over on loop.
Yes, I watched that. Yeah, that's the highlight of my week. I watched the Airbender trailer, and that thing was so accurate to the story and to the animation. It completely erased my memory of whatever happened like 10 years ago. So I'm just like, yeah,
Didn't
I like
it?
that.
Didn't it? Yeah, I felt the same way.
Yeah.
Because I was a fan of the show too, and when M. Night Shyamalan
Some
did the
Shyamalan is
movie, I was like,
Shyamalan.
yeah, I'm sorry. My apologies to the director. I messed up your name, but yeah, I was just like, oh man, he really screwed this one up. And yeah, lo and behold, they dropped the trailer today, and I was like, oh, dang,
yeah,
it looks legit.
yeah,
So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully they
Yeah,
deliver
hopefully.
it.
I haven't checked it out yet, but I will say, contrary to probably most opinions, I'm actually a fan of Legend of Korra a little more than
Get
original.
out.
Oh,
Just leave.
those are fighting words, man.
I know,
out.
I know, man.
No, Legend of Korra was great in its own. That first season was fantastic, man. With the I forget the character's name, the one who was able to bend your powers away from you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What a great
I'm
villain!
on.
Yeah, Haman, what a great villain! I really
Yeah.
loved that whole season. That was a fantastic written season.
Yeah, I would say the first season was solid. And I think the animation, it was just really good throughout the whole show.
Yeah,
I just didn't like the storytelling in the second and third season. I couldn't get past the second season, so
Mhm.
that's just me.
I can't remember what, it's been a while, so I can't remember like the breakdowns. There were some weaker parts, but for some reason I liked how they like progressed the world.
Yeah,
I thought it was very interesting.
very interesting that the way they did that.
So,
Surprising too.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so nothing, Ken. Just watching the Avatar trailer all week. That's about all you did.
All week. No, it just dropped today actually, but
Oh, my
yeah,
bad.
just regular old marketing stuff. Eventually I'll get to a point where I can just kind of start doing it regularly on not autopilot, but just like actually start getting into it and then draw when I have time. But for now it's just like, I'm getting there. I'm working to it.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. We expect to see some more results next week.
Don't count on it.
Don't count.
Even if it's a stick figure, Ken, it's okay. You drew something.
All right. I'll try.
I know you've been drawing something this week, but anyway.
I tried.
Julius, man, what about you? So you're predominantly a comics writer.
Yeah.
I know you have a Kickstarter going on right now. We'll kind of get a little bit into that here in a little bit, but have you been kind of bearing down on the? I'm sorry, not Kickstarter, Indiegogo. Are you bearing down on that, or are you writing other scripts? What else you got going on in the
Yeah,
comics world?
the script for Vigilant Fury has already been written out. It's done. So the artist is just drawing it at this point. But yeah, this week I was pretty busy actually. I was working on a commission by a client who hired me to help him develop a story idea he had. And that's been working out pretty well. Because I'm at the point in my life where I'm very comfortable developing stories. And if someone comes to me with an idea with all their context intact, then I could develop. I'm pretty confident in developing a story from beginning to end the way they want, as opposed to like, I guess, in other words, like I've checked my ego. I've learned to check my ego. In other words, where I could just here's the story, here it is. If this is not the way you want it, just give me the notes. I'll rewrite it the way you want, and then I'll give it back to you. But I'm going to follow the structure, the 3-arc structure, that kind of stuff. And I did that, worked on that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was about to ask, is that a side thing you're doing, or is that like a main job?
It's a side thing I'm doing. I'm trying to find avenues, of revenue to come in, even if it's not a lot, if it's just nickels and dimes, as long as I can start doing it and the reputation builds up to the point where, hopefully the clients are happy with what I do and they recommend me, hey, you should hire this guy. This guy's really good. He's fast, whatever. And then the second thing I did was I'm currently the editor of the Kryptonals comic book, published by Blacktooth Comics and 656 Comics, currently in shops right now. We're on issue 4. Issue 5 is out, I think, later this month. Yeah, that's been fun. So yesterday I was working on a few edits that they provided me to look over, and like an editor's job, right? You gotta tell the writer, this is not working, you gotta change it. Here's what I suggest. Here's some ideas. You come up with the magic and do it, but it's not, some things are not working and whatnot.
Right.
And
You said it's
I did
called
that
the
yesterday.
Cryptidinals?
Cryptonals, yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
It's a it's a superhero team book. It's like a love letter to Chris Claremont's X-Men. Kind of has the same
Okay.
flavor, and I dig it. I've been digging it.
Cool.
It's a horror comic. It's a horror
This is it?
monster comic. Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
Nice.
So you said, I'm sorry, you said that you're editing it?
I'm the editor of the book. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, okay, nice.
Awesome.
And it's coming out through Black Tooth Comics.
Black Tooth
okay.
Comics. So they've got it. Right now they got the diamond distribution, so they're getting into shops, and they have the arts by Dario Rodriguez. He's based
Nice.
off of Juarez, Mexico, and Dario is actually Texas. He's from El Paso.
Oh, wow.
Nice. That's
And
awesome.
Oliver is the book designer, and he's also based off of Juarez. And Dominic, I forget his last name, Arce is the letterer, I believe.
Nice.
Nice. Dude, that's dope.
Yeah,
man.
great book. Really a lot
Yeah.
of fun. Very dark. Very dark.
Yeah.
and, but
Right.
a lot of fun though at the same time. So that's my weekly comics grind. And
That's
you know,
awesome,
I always keep a journal with me. I like keeping a little bit of old school, so I always keep a journal with me at all times in case I do get an idea, or I observe something that's interesting, or I see something that's interesting. I write it down in my journal to kind of keep and log away and look back to whenever I need it.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome, man.
Nice.
You've had quite the productive week, man. You've got kind of basically three consistent projects going.
Yeah, I'm trying to get there, man. Like Brian Michael Bendis was one of my favorite writers. Not so much now, but
Oh.
like 10,
What do you
10,
mean,
15
man?
years
Legion
ago,
of
he was.
Superheroes was awesome.
Yeah, he was one of my favorites. He was one of my top 5 writers currently, at the time currently, because he wrote 5 books a month.
Mm.
And it's like that out for me, that was like, I want to get there. I want to do 5 books a month. That's where I want to be. And the fact that he was able to write 5 books a month and deliver them with such high quality that I mean, I think that's the standard, I think, for every writer that they should shoot for. Sorry,
Yeah.
my
Well, what
little
changed?
daughter. My little daughter just came in.
Special guest appearance.
Okay.
Dude, that's awesome, man. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, we'll get a little bit more into that, into some of your favorite writers and all that here in a sec. But in terms of stuff that I've done this week, I have been, for the most part, like I think I mentioned in the last podcast, I'm kind of taking a few steps back from the graphic novel from West Not South, just to kind of give me some fresh eyes. Julius, you probably I know Ken is, but familiar with the term to kind of like, you do a project, you kind of shelf it for a little bit, and then
Yes.
come back with fresh eyes to kind of read
Yes.
over it, kind of get back to it. So I'm kind of in that phase right now. Especially, we're kind of winding down towards the end of the year.
Right.
So in my meantime, I've been working on Brew Monsters, which is the book that I kind of talked a little bit about in the last podcast. But essentially, it's a comedy comic about 5 Universal monster friends that open up a brewery in Transylvania. So
Nice.
and most likely at the time of this recording, I will have or started to releasing pages on my Substack. So it's going to be all serialized on the Substack. New pages every Friday is what I'm aiming for. So this podcast will come out in 2 weeks. So the first page should be coming out in like a couple days. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been kind of head down working on that. It's super fun because it's pretty far removed from West Not South. I was kind of thinking about it earlier, but West Not South is kind of like my Animaniacs meets A24 project.
Oh, okay.
Whereas this one is more of like more streamlined, kind of like I kind of compare it to more of like a cartoon strip kind of adult animated show like a Bob's Burgers or something like that.
Oh,
Is kind
nice.
of
Right.
what the
Okay.
project is. So yeah, I'm having fun doing it. And subscribe to the Substack to read it for free.
All right.
All you watchers out there. That's at nicorodriguez.substack.com. Shameless plug. But
Yep.
it's a fun book. If it sounds appealing to the watchers out there, it's probably going to be appealing once you start reading it, because it's exactly what it's what I was talking about. So,
Cool.
but yeah, that's kind of been my week in comics.
Nice.
Actually, Julius, really quick, can you explain your at name? A Lucid Comic?
Yeah, it's the name of the what I hopefully will become a publishing company or a studio, comic book studio, a Lucid
Oh,
Comic.
okay.
Lucid is pretty much, kind of you're highly alert,
Right.
highly I don't want to say illuminated, but you're it was just the perfect word for me, because all my life I've always been curious. I've always been curious about the world. I've always been curious about my surroundings. My mom used to always say, "Oh, my little thinker," because I would just stare off into the distance and like, have these like thoughts of say, what am I doing here? Why am I here? What is this place? And it led to a philosophical, life for a long time. I've kind of, grounded myself a bit, because I was kind of lost in the clouds there for a while, and
All right.
thankfully, my wife, pulled me down and said, "Hey, you gotta, you gotta come down here, and like,
Yeah.
you had enough time to contemplate and whatnot. It's time for you to get to work." And it's like, all right, you're right. It's time for me to get to work. So Lucid Comic was the idea, the name I came up with, because I want all my comic books to have that like flavor of, when the reader reads my stories, not only do they get a good story, but they also will have like a profound that's my hope anyway, a profound effect after they read it. Like, oh wow, I never thought of it like that, or I never really seen the world in this way, or just seen this perspective, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that's what the name Lucid Comic comes from.
Nice. Because I've
That's
seen it a lot on Twitter, and I was just like, what does that mean?
that's kind of
Yeah.
interesting, because Ken, aren't you, no, subliminal is the art style that you're into, right, Ken? Is
Oh, like
what was it again?
liminal art?
Liminal. Okay.
Liminal
Yeah,
For
art.
liminal
some reason, I
space.
was thinking it was lucid, but it's liminal art. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
it's a little different.
Gotcha. Um,
Wait, what is that? Liminal, luminal or liminal?
Liminal. It's like it just means like the space in between. I don't know how you describe it. It's like when you look at an empty mall and nobody's there, and you're
Yeah.
the only one just kind of walking through, and it's just an empty space that I don't know how to describe it. It's just something you gotta like look up, but it's like a vibe or an aesthetic that's kind of unsettling, but also comfortable at the same time. It's just weird.
Mm,
But I like
okay.
the feeling
All
that
right.
it gives off when you look at it.
I'll have to look at it. I have to look
nice.
that up. That's cool.
We
Yeah,
have to do a whole episode on it, Ken. You're gonna have to
we do.
break it down like a
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
whole
great.
lecture.
Yep.
Um, cool, man. Well, that's good, man. I think we're all onto something. Even you, Ken. Were you were productive this week, right?
A little bit. Yeah.
um, cool, man. Well, let's kind of just kind of start chatting about some stuff.
Cool.
Kind of kind of one of the things I want to talk to you about, Julius. You know, we kind of always like to think about, balance in terms of, your home life, your work life, your creative life.
Mm,
And we kind of always like to get, or I mean, I do, I'm pretty sure Ken does as well, but to get perspectives of other creators and how they're kind of balancing it. And maybe some tips for the other creators that are watching out there. So in
Yeah.
terms of your balance of creator work and your other life stuff, how are you doing with that, Julius? Do you have like a set routine you do for your writing while balancing everything else? Any kind of tips regarding that?
Actually,
Yeah.
Nico, um, I wanted to specify the question a little bit more, but
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you start your creative career after you started a family? Because we had uh my friend came on the show like a few weeks ago. He's a new father, and he's just now getting started with his like comics career. And I was wondering, did you start your comics work after you had a family and you were married and all that, or did you start before? And like, what is the difference? Oh, like, how does the difference feel between starting your creative endeavors before starting a family and now?
Oh, good question. I started a long time ago. I started when I was 18.
Oh well.
I started reading comic books since I was 12. That was the first. That was when I started reading them, actively reading them. I would go to the shops every week with the allowance money I had, and collected. Like everyone else, collected my issues. Went to the shops and spoke to the other readers that were at the shops and picked their brains and what have you. And at 18, I decided to actually pursue it. And for a while there, a lot of mistakes were made on the way on my part. But I will say that the experience I've gained and the knowledge I've gained in the years from 18 until maybe I would say probably like 33 or 34,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not ashamed. I'm in my 40s now. I'm 41.
Mm-hmm.
And that period was my most productive because I didn't have a family yet. I wasn't married,
Right.
and all the money that I had saved from after paying my bills, I was able to funnel it to my projects. Now,
Nice.
a lot of the one regret I do have, because we all have them, right?
Yeah.
My biggest one is I should have gone to school and learned how to draw. That's what I should have done. I should have just gone to school. Who cares how long it took me? Who cares how much work I had to put into it? I should have learned how to draw, because it would have been a whole lot easier to draw comic books. As opposed to, unfortunately for comic book writers like myself, we have to rely on other people to get our vision onto paper.
Right.
And a lot of the times they're reliable. No, I'm sorry. A lot of times they're not reliable. Some of
Right.
the time they're reliable, because, as you know, indie creation is hard because we get priced out. That's how I lost a lot of my projects during that period of time, because I got priced out. Someone came along and said, "Oh, I'll offer you this. I'll offer you double if you come work with me now."
Damn.
And then
Yeah.
eventually, "Oh, I'm sorry, man. Like I got to do this project. I got a family to think
Contract.
about, whatever." And I say, "Hey, of course,
Yeah.
all good."
Did
But
you ever consider the Kubert School?
I did.
You
I
got
did, but
afford
then I
it?
looked at tuition and I was like, I can't afford that.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh well, everything was trial and error, essentially. So
Right.
I bought, Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, and after I read that book and studied it, I then studied and read Making Comics by Scott McCloud,
Yeah.
and I got my hands on a bunch of tutorial books of how to, make comic books, how to write them, how to, knowing the lingo, right? Medium shot, long shot, wide shot, bird's eye view, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And but it wasn't until I came across Jim Shooter's blog. I want to say I was probably 27 or 28 at the time when this blog was active. It's not active now, but
Right.
when he was actively blogging, it was the best school I think I've ever had the privilege of getting for free, because
Wow.
he pretty much gave away the writer's secrets, not so much the artist secrets, but the writer's secrets. Like, he, in every blog post, he would say, writers today don't know how to write visually. And that's why a lot of writers don't make it for long. There's only a few writers that do make it in the long run. And the ones who do are the ones who understand how to write visually. And yeah,
Right.
that's it. I highly recommend you guys check out his blog. He gave like just priceless knowledge with this blog. It's not his entire blog. So they only archived a few blog posts he had, but I mean, it was just like a switch went on. It's like, oh, okay, that's how you do it.
Right.
And so in the 10 plus years that I've been trying to make it, right? The difference now is that, yeah, I have a kid that she came, I told her, hey, daddy's going to go on stream. He has to talk to people. So don't come in, don't interrupt, but she still did it anyway, and I can't get mad at that. But it's now it's a lot more serious. Now now the clock is ticking, because if I don't find any kind of financial success doing what I love to do, then I'm gonna have to probably shift and like do something else. Maybe my calling is editing. Maybe I'll get lucky and get an editing gig, and I don't mind, as long as it involves comic books. I don't care exactly what kind of success I get, so as long as it's within the realm of comic book making.
Right.
So if I write them, cool. If I edit them, cool. If I'm a editor in chief of a little publishing house, cool. If I am the head of a studio where artists and other writers work with me, cool. As long as we're churning out work and there's some financial success gain there, because I mean, part of the reason why we do this is to get paid too. We want to get paid doing what we love.
Yeah.
And that's the goal that we all have. And I think now is the time to do it. But since everyone else was doing it, it's hard to stick out. It's hard to I guess pull people in,
Right.
And that's what I tell every young writer who's trying to make comics now, who's 10 years younger than me, whatever, they're starting now. I always tell them, back in the 90s, back in the 80s, it was easier because there weren't so many gadgets around. There was no YouTube, there was no Instagram, there was no instant gratification around. It was just TV, movies, and that's it. Now you have video games, now you have social media, you have all sorts of things where it's gimme, now. So I always tell writers, always capture them in the first 5 pages. Always do it. Whether be it a drama, a comedy, an action piece, whatever, you gotta hook them in the first 5 pages to get them vested in your story.
Right.
And so that's pretty much what Vigilant Fury is. That's how I wrote Vigilant Fury. It's once the action starts, it doesn't stop. It goes until the end. Ghetto Dragon is a little different. Ghetto Dragon is a little slower because that's a bit more of a kind of a slice of my upbringing in the ghetto streets of Orange County. And that one, I'm taking my time with that one, because that one I feel like it's like my I guess in a lot of ways it's like my Watchmen, my magnum opus, Ghetto Dragon. But then again, I have tons and tons of other stories, collecting digital dust in my laptop, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about that is that you've got markets for both of those types of books. You have the book, the market for like those more slice of life, autobiographical kind of stories, which is interesting, which may have not been so much 10, 20, 30 years ago,
Right.
so which is interesting. So just to kind of go back just a little bit, Julius, so is your eventual goal to kind of to be full-time at this stuff, or are you okay having like those editing gigs that are kind of supplemental to like your main day job or whatever?
Yeah, the goal is full-time for sure.
Yeah.
The goal is to get some revenue coming in as I'm producing books or stories or even editing gigs. But I wouldn't mind sticking with my day job because it is paying the bills. And, thankfully I have, my bosses are very understanding and very giving with their time. They let me, they know what I'm trying to do. They know what I'm trying to accomplish. I don't make it a secret, because I love comic books. When I first started dating my wife, she couldn't believe I read comic books. Because I I don't like to. I guess because when we met, I was really deep, like I mentioned earlier, I was deep in philosophy. I was reading philosophy books. I was reading Plato. I was reading Aristotle. I was
Oh wow.
reading so all these books, all these like deep thinker books, right? And I could converse with her and I could talk about anything. And then eventually, when she started to get to know me more, she was like, "You read comic books?" I was like, "Yeah, comic books are great. There are a lot of writers in comic books that write some great out there stuff that's like really interesting and very fascinating to like, when after you read a book, you put it down, you're like, and you sit there and think about it for a few days. A lot of writers like that." And her biggest surprise too was that, which is my guilty pleasure, is I'm a big fan of wrestling, professional wrestling,
Nice.
WWE, AEW, that kind of stuff. And she was like, "What? Like, how can you have all these books here about philosophy and you read and you watch? That's fake, right?" I was like, "Yeah, I know it's fake. I know, like it's scripted. It's fun. It's like entertainment." But yeah, I just I love making comic books. It's so satisfying, gratifying
Right.
to tell the story you want to tell and enjoy watching readers enjoy what you gave them. That's
Nice.
that's what I want. That's all I want. I mean, yeah, of course get paid too, but I also want the
Right.
satisfaction of like, oh man, your book was so great. It was I couldn't put it down, or I
Right.
cried. I cried after reading your book, or I laughed my ass off after reading your book.
Yeah.
And that's very gratifying for me. Yeah, I've always been, that always been wanting to push for that.
Right. I actually have a question on that note. Um, what do you think is missing in the comics industry today? And then how does your comic fill in that gap?
Yeah, I feel like today's I stopped reading mainstream books about, I would say maybe 7 years ago, I think at this point,
Mm,
because I started, I was still collecting them. I was still buying a few Marvel books here, a few DC books here, but I started realizing, hey, it's just not, it's not hitting the same. It's not hitting me
right.
the same like it used to. And for a while there, I thought I was outgrowing them. I was like, am I outgrowing it? Am I outgrowing comics? Like, am I like just over it and I don't care no more? And so I looked through my old collection because I have a few long boxes
Hmm.
that are in my garage. So I was looking through my old collections, picking out the books that I collected growing up, and I reread them, and I was like, oh no, the quality's gone down. The quality of the work has gone down, and I think it's because I honestly I don't know what the reason is, but I just know the quality went down for whatever reason. Maybe it's because there are a lot of writers today that they want their books to be made into movies,
Mm.
and there's no love for the medium. There's no love
Ah,
for trying to emotionally manipulate the reader to enjoy their story.
right.
So you think of like for instance, you think of Ultimate X-Men. I used to love reading Ultimate X-Men, Mark Millar
Mhm.
and the Kubert brothers.
Oh wow.
That first run when they first launched Ultimate X-Men.
Uh-huh.
And I remember feeling stuff after reading a good storyline. Like when I mean feeling stuff, I'm talking about like, oh, a moment of triumph for the characters, and you're left going, oh, that's
Right.
so cool, man. Oh, I can't believe they made it, or Wolverine won the day, or Cyclops won the day, or whatever. And then there's also Peter David was another favorite writer of mine who
Right.
wrote
Yeah.
the Hulk, and he wrote another comic book that's underrated, and I think people should try to find this book. Spy Boy, with he wrote with Pop Mon
Oh
for
yeah.
Dark Horse Comics.
Yeah,
That was
man.
a favorite of mine. Same thing,
Mhm.
same thing. It's just I feel like the writers back in the day cared about the medium, cared about entertaining the readers, and this whole nonsense about agendas or whatever. It's like that's always been a thing. That's always been everywhere. Doesn't matter where you're from. It's just for me, it's about subtlety. Can you do it
Mm.
with subtlety? Because I don't mind it. I never mind it. But if you
Mhm.
do it if you throw it in my face, then it's gonna throw me off from the story. And
Right.
there's an old Eastern proverb that says, I love chocolate, but the moment you try to stuff it down my throat, I spit it out.
Mm,
Because no one likes to be forced, right? It's always about
right.
subtlety. All the great stories can have their messages and themes, but they got to have subtlety. And I feel like today's writers, as good as they are, because I have read a few books recently because of my co-host on my YouTube channel. He goes
Mhm.
and buys books weekly. He's in his 20s. He's just a reader. He loves comics. And so he always hands me these comics. Hey, read this. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. And I read them and I'm like, hey, these are good. But once again, there's no like I guess emotional pull for them. It's like, yeah, it's
Right.
good, but I don't care. Like I don't care about
Mm,
these characters. I don't care what's going to happen to them next. The only exception is the big game currently with Mark Millar and
yeah.
Pepe. See, she's back again. See what I mean? Say hi.
Hi.
What's
Okay,
that?
go sit down. And then Captain America,
Mhm.
Straczynski, the new one. That one was good. I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm emotionally vested into what they're gonna do with the character here.
Nice.
But I
So
think that's
then,
what it is. And what I'm going to answer the second part of your question, which is
right.
where my stories fill in. That's essentially what I want to do. That's essentially the kind of stories I want to write. And I hope,
Right.
I hope Vigilant Fury does that. Because when I was writing it, and when I got to the end of the story, when I was writing the script and I wrote her arc, her adventure,
Uh-huh.
and then when I got to the end of it, I actually had tears in my eyes because of the scene
Nice.
I was writing, because of how powerful getting her there. The whole point of getting her there, and at the end when she's pretty much like think of it like her last. She's pretty much in her last, almost her last breath. She almost killed herself to save herself and the other people that were with her in the ship. And when I got her to the end, it was like, like I had to like sit back and like, you know, compose myself a bit because I was kind of losing. I had tears, like I said, running in my eyes. I wasn't
Nice.
weeping or anything. It was just like coming out. I was just like, okay, I gotta calm down. Um,
Right.
and I'm hoping that comes off to the reader when they read it. That's my goal, and I think that's what every creator, you Nico and you Ken, I think that's what, if you want some advice from me, I think that's what you should go for. Yes, tell your stories, of course, tell your stories the way you know how, the best you know how, but we're emotional beings too. We have
Right.
emotions. We feel anger, we feel happiness, we feel jealousy, envy. And if you could pull those strings from the readers, that's how readers can identify and connect with characters in fantastical books like comics or novels or
Right.
movies. And I think that's
Right.
what's missing, is that.
Cool.
Awesome.
That's good stuff, man. Ken, you had
Yeah.
something there?
Oh no, I was just saying that's a really great
Yeah.
answer. Um.
No, yeah, that was fantastic, man. And now that you kind of, bringing what's the full title of your book? Vigilant Fury?
Vigilant Fury, yes.
Awesome. I guess we can kind of go a little bit into that. Kind of give us that unless Ken, you have something there? Yeah.
Oh, I was about to say like why the specific focus on, I guess you could say, like crime fighters that aren't really like superheroes. Like
Yeah.
they just kick ass, but
Yeah.
they're not wearing
I-
capes.
yeah, I'm laughing because I was talking to my co-host actually of my YouTube channel, and he asked me the same question you did just now. He's like, hey, how is it that
Really?
why this and Ghetto Dragon and not like a superhero comic? And I sat there going, I don't know. I don't know why. It just it boils down
We need
to
to get
what they always say.
we need to
Oh,
get a little context. So like Ghetto Dragon and Vigilant Fury, are they both crime oriented? Are they both crime books or
yes, they
yeah.
are.
Right.
Yes, they are. As I was gonna say, like every writer, right? Most writers anyway, I hope. It just felt right. It felt right writing these stories. It felt
Yeah.
like I needed to write these stories. And Vigilant Fury, if you look at my YouTube channel, I do have a series called Struggles of a Indie Comic Writer. And excuse me,
What is your YouTube channel called, really?
Julius
quick.
Freeman Comics.
Okay, cool.
And then in that video, I explained how the idea for Vigilant Fury was like a woodpecker in my head, like going like this. And they wanted me to
Really?
write out this idea, and I had to write out the idea because it was like this bugging me.
Yeah.
And Ghetto Dragon was mainly because I felt like there weren't enough martial arts comics out there, and I love Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is one of my favorite, all-time movie stars, martial artists of all time. And so I felt, instead of doing a Bruce Lee comic book, I'm gonna do a character who's like Bruce Lee, but put him in a scenario that involves, a dangerous street gang, and and also do it differently too, because the Ghetto Dragon is more like it's more of a tragedy story about a character who knows he can kick ass, but his downfall is his arrogance. It's his pride. That's his downfall, because he feels so invincible that he doesn't realize what he does when he does attack a dangerous gang who pretty much warns him to leave him be, but he doesn't, because he's like, I can kick your ass no matter what. But they go, okay, well, we're going to show you what we can do. And then they go after his family. They attack his family to calm him down. And then it escalates from there. And and Vigilant Fury is the same. It's not the same idea. It's the idea was essentially, what would happen if someone who was skilled, like a government agent, taken against their will, and how would they escape from that if they were in that situation? That's where that idea came from, essentially. But yeah, I decided after Vigilant Fury and after Ghetto Dragon, superhero all the way after this.
Oh, really? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So are you gonna try to put like some of the philosophy stuff that inside the in the, like, are you gonna interweave it into the comics?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Sorry, she's
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like, I haven't read Ghetto Dragon, but there is so much philosophy with like a Bruce Lee figure. Because I read the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, like his.
Oh yeah, same here. Yeah.
So like, there's
Nice.
so much like Confucianism and everything in there. And since you're into the philosophy thing, I could certainly see how you could inject your main character in with some of that stuff.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway from the Tao of Jeet Kune Do was when he mentioned Mortal Kombat, and how it really is mortal. Like, if you are in a street fight, there are no rules.
Yeah,
anything goes in a street fight. So you have to prepare yourself mentally and all that stuff in his book. So I thought, oh, that's an interesting idea. I'm going to use that. I'm going to inject that into this character and like showcase that he isn't afraid to break bones or send people to the hospital because he's in that mentality of Mortal Kombat. I'm going to, like, they're trying to kill me, so I'm going to, put you to the hospital first. And Vigilant Fury was, the philosophy behind that was, how do you counter violence, right? How do you counter someone who's going to commit violence against you? Because violence is a grave, I guess, for lack of a better word, a grave sin against human free will, right? We're all born with free will, and it's a travesty when someone takes that away from you. Someone yanks it away from you by kidnapping you or taking something from you, or violating you in any way, be it, robbing you from your home or whatever. Right. And so I figured, okay, what's the best counter to violence? And it's force. It's force. So I figured, okay, so Vigilant Fury she's gonna be a force of nature to fight against the violence that has been, that befell upon her when she was on vacation. So that's kind of the idea I had with the Vigilant Fury when I was developing it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Just kind of going back to the Bruce Lee book we were talking about, I think, when you were saying like, no rules apply, I think the best representation of that in the book is when they're showing like all the figures of like, you know, the different moves.
Right. Yeah.
And then they have the one where it's just like a kick to the nuts.
Yep.
Like, there's no rules in a street fight. It's
Yep.
just
No
straight up
rule.
do whatever you can, kick
Mhm.
to the nuts, elbow, you know, scratch, claw, bite, you know, do whatever.
Yeah,
you gotta
dude. Yep. Yep. And I also researched a lot of like World Star videos when I was developing
Of
Ghetto
course.
Dragon, because
Yep.
those are real fights. Those are real street fights. And you know, it's not a cage fight where you have to, you know, bounce around and kind of, you know, read your opponent. It's a straight up
Right.
like, I'm gonna get you before you get me. And it's
Yep.
quick. It's real fast. And so that's what I want to capture with Ghetto Dragon, is that quickness of it. Like the boom, boom, you're done. Like you're out.
Right.
So that's yeah, you're right, man. It's crazy. I love, that's what I love about the book, that Bruce Lee wasn't
Yeah.
afraid to say, no, you could do this. It's
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, that's like the ultimate definition of, you know, we all know the famous quote, you know, be like water. That's exactly what he's talking about.
Exactly.
You're
Yeah.
water, you're fluid, you do whatever you need to kind of get around the form. But what we got
Right.
here, this is the page here.
Yep.
This is the page, Vigilant Fury.
Awesome. Yeah, man,
It
go ahead and give us a little spiel on it.
yeah,
What's it all
so
about?
it's about Angela Peretz. She is vacationing in Florida, and she is drugged and kidnapped by human traffickers. And when she wakes up from her unconscious state, she finds herself inside a container on a cargo ship headed straight to the Atlantic. And she escapes from her captivity, doesn't know where she's at. So she essentially plans her escape, and her captors not quickly realize, but they soon discover that she's actually they'd actually kidnapped a government agent on vacation. that's the
Wow.
that's the big reveal in the middle of the story, is that, oh, she's actually a government agent. So at that point, it's a little too late. She's already done a lot of damage, and now it's just a matter of heading, reaching the finish line. The book is drawn by
Right.
Anthony Gambino. He went to, I forgot what school it was, but he recently graduated, I think, a few years ago from the art school he attended. And this is his first book. This is his first
That's
official
amazing, actually.
comic book work. And
And it's really reminiscent of like Frank Miller style.
yeah, that's what we're going for. We're going for that Frank Miller style. Originally, we were going to go for the harsh black and white that Frank Miller did for Sin City, the really like harsh, like black and white, like ink style, heavy ink.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he, in the middle of it, in the middle of the project, he decided, no, I don't want to do that. It's not fun. It's not working out for me.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, well, what do you have in mind? That's when he ink wash. And I was like, ink wash. I was like, oh yeah, ink wash. All right, that's cool. And there you have it. That's what that's the outcome of that. And
Yeah,
for
I think it
being
really works.
his first book, I have to say, I am proud of the fact that he has been delivering some fantastic looking pages.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
He puts backgrounds in every panel.
Yeah.
That's like insane.
Yeah, I know. And he loves doing the backgrounds, which is even better for me, because
Nice.
that was important for me too. My big thing is facial expressions and body language. That's my personal hangups. If they don't have the proper facial expression or body language, then I'm a stickler for that kind of thing. Because
Right.
again, going back to what I talked to you guys about earlier, the emotional pull, right? When you want to emotionally pull in the reader to feel something for the story they're reading, body language and facial expressions are key for that, as
Right.
well as the dialogue that's attached to the panel.
Mhm.
Definitely. So is he doing all the artwork on the boards, or is he doing a mix of digital in there? Do you know?
It's all traditional.
Yeah.
All
So
of it.
Nice.
it certainly looks that way for sure.
Yeah, it's all traditional. As a writer, again, as I learned in the 10 years I've been writing, a lot of mistakes were made. I had a lot of fallouts with artists because of my approach to making comics. They didn't like it, and I didn't know any better. But now I do. Now I've learned, how to properly approach an artist to work, with me. And so
Right.
when I asked Anthony, I said, "Hey, what kind of script do you want? Do you want a fully detailed script where I tell you exactly what to draw in every panel? You know, with the camera angle, with the a full paragraph description, or do you want to do the Marvel way? The Marvel way being very loose, very you just 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and then a generic description, and you figure out all that stuff." And he chose number 2. And I'm glad he did, because I'm really happy with what he came up with.
Cool. So
Nice.
you're writing the whole script in Marvel method. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
How many pages is the book?
80 pages.
Gotcha.
It was
Nice.
supposed
Solid.
to be 40, but
You know how it
um,
goes, man.
as I kept, you mentioned, Nico, earlier in the show about how you stepped away from your project, so that you have fresh eyes. So that's
Mhm.
what I do the same thing.
Yeah.
So I wrote the first draft, stepped away for a day or two, went back to it, reread it, and went, it's a little. This is, maybe I need to add this here, to add that there, and then maybe, and then when I finished the second edit, it went to 50 pages,
Mhm.
and I went, okay, oh crap. So I texted Anthony and said, "Hey, I'm sorry, man, but it's gonna be 50 pages." And he said, "Oh, not a problem, man. No, that's cool. Whatever." And I did it again. Waited, put it away for a day or two. Went back to it, reread it, and went, "Oh no, it's not working out. I gotta work this." Ended up going to 60 pages, and the more edits I did, the more pages that were added,
Damn.
until finally, when I got to the final draft, it ended with 80 pages. And called Anthony and said, "I'm sorry, man, but this is 80 pages long," and he was not happy about it. So I gave him a compromise. I said, "Look, here's what I'm going to do. I'll give you the script, okay? You can read it, and if you can cut 40 pages and still make it work, I'm all ears and I'm all game." So he's like, "Okay, cool, fine, I can do that." I gave him the script. It took him about a week and a half to read it, and then when he came back, he says, "We can't cut this. We can't cut this at all. It has to stay intact." Because pacing is important in the story as well. If the pacing is off, you lose the reader, and that's another thing that's missing in today's comic book field. Ken, to keep on to add to that answer, to your question. I mean,
Yeah.
is that the pacing is off? I've noticed in a lot of these books.
Mm.
It's too fast or too slow at some points, and then too fast. It's like doesn't know what it wants. Doesn't know. They don't know how they want to approach it, which is interesting
Right.
to me, because I don't know if that's an editorial thing. I don't know if that's a style choice. Maybe it's a style choice, and I don't get it because I'm my age. But um what's his name? Jim Shooter, in his blog, he did say pacing is very important in
Right.
in the delivery of a certain story. So his example was, if you're writing a drama, then of course you don't need it to be fast. It needs to go slow. It needs to go down the shift, down the shift for the gear. But if it's
Right.
action, then of course you got to shift up the gear and properly write it where at the end of every page is a mini cliffhanger. So that way they want to turn the page to find out
Yeah.
what happens
Right.
next. And that's a skill set that I've noticed is gone in most modern writing today. Is they don't have
Yeah.
that mini cliffhanger per page to make you want to turn the page.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like the story just kind of happens. It just keeps going and going, but
Yeah,
there's no compelling force to make me want to keep reading. It's just like,
exactly.
here it is. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, what do I do with this?
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what some, just speaking on the writing terms, when things are a little too verbose and there's just too much captioned dialogue, or
Yeah.
just too much dialogue in
Yeah,
general, I think that's I'm a reader. I've read many a novels in my time, like, so it's not like that I don't like reading. It's just that when you're reading comics, like, I feel like sometimes it needs to be like the greatest hits of like the story, to kind of keep
Mm.
it
mhm,
to keep it like rocking, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Of course, you need to slow it down a little bit, you know, if there's like some kind of important message or, you know, conversation or something. But man, sometimes when I open up a Scott Snyder book and I see a wall of text, I'm just like, oh man, I don't know if I want to go into this. You know,
Just open it and close it right back up again.
Yeah, and you know, Scott Snyder is a great writer too. He's one of my
Yeah.
favorites. But yeah, sometimes like, dude, come on, like really a comic book?
Yeah.
Write a
I think
novel if that's what you want.
I think sometimes his research gets in the way of like telling a like compelling story.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, for sure. He's certainly a researcher. I mean, I love Witches. I don't know if y'all read Witches.
Are you talking about the Witches?
Huh?
Are you talking about the Witches?
You talking about like the reference from what Nick was talking about?
Or is it Whiteches?
Whiteches.
Oh, okay, Whiteches. Okay.
Yeah, I love that. I love that book. That's, you know, it's a Scott Snyder book, but you know, yeah. So, sometimes see those walls of text, I'm just like, oh man, I don't know if I want to get into this right now.
Yeah, I'll take a break at those points, and I'll be like, all right, I'll come back to it. Take it one bubble at a time.
Chapter break.
Yeah.
Yeah. Julius, man, one thing I wanted to ask you, and I think we've gotten perspectives on this before with other guests too, but so what do you know, you're predominantly right now a indie comics writer, editor, all that kind of stuff. Do you think nowadays in this modern times of comic making, do you think it's still critical to have like those big named credits under your creator name, meaning like you did work for Dark Horse, you did work for IDW, you did work for yada yada? Do you think that that's still a kind of a big thing that you need to kind of make this comics a real legitimate career, or do you think that that's not so important anymore?
It's a little bit of both, I feel. You know, there is some legitimacy when you do have a string of credits working for publishers, because we've been conditioned, everyone's been conditioned to see that as important. It's the reason why Ethan Van Sciver was able to raise $1 million for his Cyberfrog comic book. It wasn't because he drew a great Cyberfrog character. It was because he had 10 years of DC and Marvel work under him.
Right.
And those readers were fan of his. So they followed him for his personal work. So yeah, I think that's part of it. Yeah, part of it is like it does legitimize you in the eyes of the readers who, for the most part, go to the shops and they really don't know who you are until you prove to them you could write a great story. And you get lucky when you do get a chance to write, like say for instance, a Deadpool comic or a Spider-Man comic or a Punisher, X-Men, Wolverine, whatever. Those characters are trusted name brands, right? And so the reader doesn't know who the writer is. They just pick up the book because they like the character. But then maybe the writer comes up with a fresh take on the character and they read it and they're like, oh my God. And then they find out who's the writer of this book. This is fantastic. And then that's where you get your I guess your cred, right? Your street cred.
Right.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, in this day and age, another example is Eric July, right? Eric July raised $3 million for his book Isom, the first one. He never worked for a comic book publisher. He's never done any professional comic book work. But the reason why he was able to raise that money is because he built his audience on his YouTube channel. And then when he built the audience to the large amount of number that he has, subscribers or followers, whatever, that's when he presented his product and people, his fans or his followers or his subscribers, supported him. So it's like it's almost like a double-edged sword of sorts. You know, like say for instance, let's just say for example, Nico and Ken, let's just say this show blows up and you get 30,000 subscribers. They watch your show every week, never miss it. And then you guys decide, I'm gonna sell my book. Guaranteed you'll be making a living making your comic books. because of
Right.
the I guess the gift of the modern age, which is social media and vlogging, or in this instance podcasting, on
Right.
YouTube. So I would say, yeah, a little bit of both, Nico. A little bit
Yeah.
of both.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting question. It's something that I'm always thinking about. Like how headstrong should you be in like pitching to publishers and that be like the ultimate goal, versus how headstrong should you be in like just doing your stuff,
Right.
self-publishing, campaigning, whatever.
It depends if what you want. If your goal is to be a published comic book artist, and let that be your goal. Hit it. Strike that target. It's nothing. There's no wrong way of approaching your success, I guess is what I should say.
Right.
Actually, yeah, I have a like little anecdote about that. Where Ryan Otley, he told me about how he was doing Invincible. He just finished it, and he wanted to do mainstream work next to gather people who hadn't heard it about haven't heard his name before, or hadn't
Right.
heard about his art before. He wanted to do like Spider-Man. He did Spider-Man, he did Hulk, to gather more mainstream readers, to like when he started doing independent work again, he would have that audience follow him towards that
Yeah.
independent work.
Yeah.
But he said he made his name with Invincible, with his indie work, and he was making more money from the indie work, and then and that the published work was just to gather more people. It didn't pay as well as doing the indie work. So I
Right.
thought that was an interesting perspective on that, because of his unique position.
Yeah, he did it right. He did it the right way. And I think every comic book creator, you should find your audience, find the audience that you want to sell your books to,
Right.
and and yeah, keep them. Try to keep them as much as you can, so that way you can continue on, making comic books and have a livelihood as well as you're doing
Right.
it.
Yeah, for sure. No,
So
that's good stuff, man.
yeah,
Go ahead, Ken.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, what were you gonna
Ken,
say?
you go. Ken, you go.
Oh my god. I was gonna say, just to wrap up, like, what would you say are, I guess, your 3 favorite or best like comic books that you would recommend to people um who are just like getting into comic books?
Ooh, oh man, there's so
Like,
many. But
what inspired you the most to
yeah. I'm gonna say number 1 would have to be V for Vendetta by Alan Moore and David Lloyd.
Oh right, yeah.
Just
And the
met
reason
David
for that
Lloyd.
is because it was the first time I had ever read a non-superhero comic. Because at that point, I just read superhero comics, Batman,
Right.
Spider-Man, Superman, you name it. And that was the first one that I picked up that was not a superhero comic. And I remember when I started reading it, I got mad at myself for wasting my money on such crap. And I threw it across the room, and I said, I'm just gonna give this away. This is dumb. And then I had insomnia that night. I couldn't sleep.
Dang.
And so I was laying in my bed, just like wide-eyed, not tired. It was like 2 a.m. And I was like looking at the book across the room, and I was like, I guess I got nothing else better to do. So I picked it up and I started reading it. And then after I got through the first chapter, I read the whole book that night.
Wow.
Tears in my eyes at the end with Evie's, revelation, all that stuff. It was just like a switch had turned on in my head. I was like, this is like, in other words, I discovered, oh, this is what the medium can offer. It's not just superhero comics. It's actually, you could tell any kind of story you want, as long
Right.
as it's like good. So V for Vendetta for sure, I recommend.
Nice.
Number 2 would have to be again another Alan Moore book, Miracle Man.
Oh really?
With him and John Totalbin and other artists that took on the role when he was writing it. I think that's probably the best superhero deconstruction story to come out, other than Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns.
Right.
Because it was, I just love the way he made the Shazam lore
Oh wow.
real. You know, like how would this look like in a scientific perspective? That's what he did with Miracle Man. So I had all the Shazam elements of, you know, saying the word and he transforming into the hero and all that, but he looked at it through the lens of a scientist, I guess.
Right.
So that's the second book I recommend. The third one, this is a tough one, man, but I will have to say Marvels by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross.
Nice.
It's good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, those three I recommend, because then, maybe I should do number one Marvels to kind of ease in, and then do the heavier stuff with Miracle Man and then V for Vendetta.
Yeah.
Dark
Okay.
depression.
Yeah, exactly. Marvels is a lot more lighthearted and the reason why I recommend Marvels is because it's a great history book of the Marvel lore. So you don't have to know anything about Marvel comics, but if you pick up Marvels, you'll have a nice little footnote history of everything that happened in the Marvel lore since its inception until at that point the early 2000s.
Right. Yeah. I think from the perspective of a reporter.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's awesome stuff. Man, that was awesome, Julius. Man, we really appreciate you coming on the pod today, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
do it again.
Thank you.
Insight, man. It was fantastic. We know that you have a YouTube channel too, but go ahead and plug all your YouTube channels, your social medias, all that stuff. Let everyone out there know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at Julius Freeman Comics. I am currently working on content there. I have a show called Is It Worth the Pickup, where me and my co-host Kyle review books and, you know, kind of break them down and critique them and see by the end of it, let you know if it's worth the pickup or not. Nice. And then we also have a show called Let's Talk About It, which is we discuss the various topics that are going on in the comic book industry, and I provide my old man wisdom, and he provides his young, you know, 20-something, you know, a wide eye, like, oh, everything's all great, you know, that kind of optimistic.
Right.
But Kyle is very sharp. He's a very sharp new reader. He's been reading comics for I think a year now, so he's ready to just soak it all in, and it's great to introduce him to all these books that he, you know, he has on his list to be read. And you can find me on Twitter or X, right there, A Lucid Comic. You can check me out there, and you could also check me on Instagram, A Lucid PRD. And there I just repost people's artwork, cool artwork, and post, you know, news and stuff like that. So that's where you can find me.
Man. That sounds awesome. I'm definitely gonna go check out that YouTube channel. Sounds awesome. It's pretty sweet that you got like two different kind of shows going on. That's awesome.
Yeah. I want to keep it a little diverse, you know.
Sweet, man. Awesome. How about you, Ken? Where can they find you?
Oh yeah, everyone can find me on Twitter or X at the Comic Ken, and then you can also find me on Instagram at Comic Ken, and then I'm also launching my webcomic on Global Comics, and the Kickstarter is coming up this spring, and that's for Air Rider High School Hero, and that's my webcomic.
Awesome. And you guys can find me on Instagram and on X at Nico Writes. You can also find me on my Substack and subscribe for free at nicorodriguez.substack.com. Remember, Brew Monsters is coming out on there. You can read the comic for free, serializing pages every Friday. So definitely check that out, guys. But thank you so much for watching this week, and we will see you next time.
Peace.